For Greg Healy since he led Melbourne into the 1988 grand final in his first year as captain. The Demons lost by a record 96 points, and Healy, the best and fairest winner in 1987, has struggled to find that form. Last night, he stepped down as leader.
It was probably a joint decision between Greg Healy and ourselves that Greg relinquished the situation that he was in of captain, and of course I suppose that also fitted in with the plans of maybe making a few changes, and we decided that certainly we would with Gary being captain.
The Demons have reacted ruthlessly to their meek surrender in this year's first semi-final. They've sacked players, bargained strongly for interstate recruits, and surprised no one by appointing their best player, Gary Lyon, as captain for 91.
So they're taking a hard line, and the players realise now that it's just no good being in the finals if we can't go that step further and win the grand final.
Lyon is nursing a broken thumb, courtesy of a knock in the international match in Portland, Oregon. But at 23, Lyon is regarded as one of the key forwards in the AFL, and last night he capped off yet another magnificent season by winning the Bluey Truscott Trophy as Melbourne's best and fairest. Stephen Phillips, National 9.
In the Foster's Cup at Waverley. The match brings together two teams who've had mixed success in the night competition over recent years, as Michael Roberts reports.
Melbourne are proven night campaigners, having taken the 87 and 89 flags. And coach John Northey admits with added depth this year, the stage is set for another strong series.
At the moment it appears, I would think that 40 out of the 52 players that we have would be capable of playing senior football.
One player measuring up is ex-St Kilda forward Rod Owen. After an injury-plagued 9 seasons with the Saints, the 24-year-old is carrying a lighter frame and is relishing a second chance at football's highest level.
He's trained at his 6 o'clock and he's 8 o'clock at night or whatever we've had to do, and we're very, very pleased.
7 outings, and the club's last night grand final was back in 1983. Their most memorable was a first-round victory against Carlton in 88, and coach Kevin Bartlett is looking for a similar result.
First competitive game in the Foster's Cup is very important to us, and obviously we're going out there to do our very best.
Michael Roberts, 7 Nightly News.
And brought up a 21-point win over Richmond in their Foster's Cup clash. Today, Melbourne skipper Gary Lyon was holding court at RMIT. He and St Kilda counterpart Danny Frawley were the star attractions in the annual Champions versus the Challengers Day. And after his performance at VFL Park last night, Lyon left no doubt into which category he fell. That's not to say Richmond didn't put up a brave challenge. The Tigers led at every change, but it was the Demons' experience which won out in the end. For Lyon, the victory provided a double bonus, Melbourne's first win of the year and his first in the new role of captain.
It probably tends to make you concentrate and see each quarter out a little bit harder, and a little bit more responsibility falls on your shoulders, so you're a little bit more conscious of perhaps playing a quarter out and seeing a whole game out. So from that point of view, it can only help your footy too.
Point out of these days, isn't it, with the match ratio coming into play? West Coast and Adelaide, the top 2 teams, with North Melbourne, St Kilda having played less games, all with 100% ratio. You notice that Melbourne has the same number of points as St Kilda, but a better percentage, but they're actually in 5th placing with the Saints in 4th because of the match. Cooper taken off in the first quarter against Melbourne with concussion. Now, Richard Osborne, this looked to be nasty at the time. He limped off the ground. He was aided off the ground just before half-time. But the good news for Fitzroy was he did come back. He didn't look 100% fit, but it wasn't a reoccurrence of that knee injury, which was good. This was some play right at the beginning of the final quarter, and it was really symbolic of what happened yesterday at Princes Park, with Fitzroy players at times not getting their hand on the footy quarter at the game.
He's going to stay in hospital for a few days. The doctors said today, apparently, that it was conducive to a road accident. That's how hard he was hit. Very, very severe concussion. They did the brain scans and all on him, but no damage, so he'll just lie in hospital for a couple of days and hopefully come out well. Well, that's good news, because the people that saw him carried off feared for the worst yesterday. Neck brace and all on. It looked very dicey. What about John? Very, very badly at Princes Park. It was a woeful display. Melbourne winning by 131 points. Ian Robertson was there, so was Kelvin Moore and also Ron Barassi. Robbo, it's been a long time since we've seen this team go so badly as Fitzroy. At the same time, Melbourne did play well.
Yes, Bruce, it was a very disappointing performance by the Lions, and I think that they've got a lot of work to do. Whether they've got changes that they can make that'll improve their side, well, it remains to be seen. I thought that it was probably Melbourne's big men that made the difference, and normally you give the votes to the bigger guy, but on this occasion I thought Greg Healy for his persistence all day. He started off magnificently with something like 12 possessions in the first quarter, and he fed off the 2-vote receiver, Jay Steins, who I thought was a great leader all round the ground, took a lot of marks and kicked a couple of goals and teamed very well with his counterpart, Steve O'Dwyer. And Brett Lovett, well, it was a bit of a toss-up. There were 2 or 3 that could have got that 1 vote, Brett Lovett, Glenn Lovett or Darren Bennett. I went for Brett Lovett because he was a really stingy defender. Fitzroy kicked 2 goals in the last quarter to finish up with 6, and that Melbourne defence worked very, very well, very cohesively. Spalding was a good player, and Rod Owen, I was quite impressed with Rod Owen's performance. I thought it was a good team performance by Owen, and Melbourne is certainly looking for him to improve their forward line.
Do you think Fitzroy erred in having such an inexperienced ruck up against the big Melbourne pair? I mean, they're 2 veterans, Ironmonger and Rendell, were in the reserves, weren't they?
Perhaps they are veterans, Ron. That might be the operative word.
No,
well, it certainly was, Bob, and they took a bit of a punt and it didn't come off. Ironmonger, I think, probably would have been a better bet, but...
Well, I watched them play at Geelong and they didn't deserve a place in the team.
Well, I guess, you know, right from the start, that's the way you pick the side, but Matt Rendell apparently has got a crook back, Ron.
Yeah, I didn't say they should be picked, but gee, what a feeling for the coach. His first outing as a senior coach and as a walloping like that must have taken very hard. I would imagine to be a bitter pill.
Like you, Ian, I was very impressed with the defence of the Melbourne side. I mean, on paper they look like they're up against fair opposition with Osborne and Roos down in that forward line, but I thought that Campbell has certainly kicked on from last year. He's bulked up a little bit, but he certainly shows a bit of dash and can get off the ground. And I was particularly impressed with Sean White, who's come back very well after that serious knee operation. I think he was a bonus, and as you rightly said, the Lovett boys and Stephen Clark was another one. They used the ball magnificently coming out of that half-back line and set up play upfield.
Does it mean that the West Coast Eagles will beat Fitzroy by 250 points? Does it look like that?
No, Bob, it never works that way.
No, but does it look like that?
Well, if the game was over there, I mean, Fitzroy would go over there with their tail between their legs, surely, wouldn't they?
Yes, but they can play with more spirit than they did yesterday. I mean, they've got to be fired up.
That's a great word. I thought that their attitude right from the start left a lot to be desired. Guys like Ross Lyon, who was a very talented player, Paul Roos, there are a couple of others that have got a bit of experience that, to me, just didn't look as though they were as keen as they should have been.
And of course their captain, Osborne, is that full forward where you have the least influence on the game, particularly when it's not coming down there very often.
Just quickly, I'd like to give Stevenson a bit of a rap, the young fellow who played for Fitzroy in defence. I thought he played very well. And guys like Bunn, Blakey, Jim Wind and O'Connell, the ex-Eagle player, who
Brett
I thought...
Stevens did well in Lyon.
Gary Lyon, yep.
Although well beaten in the ruck, I thought, as you mentioned, O'Connell would be a handy player, and I think there's a future for young Davis also. I mean, he looks like he's a little bit undersized to take on the likes of Steins and O'Dwyer, but certainly could be able to fit in a key position somewhere at some stage during the year. So they may have picked up something out of the wreckage yesterday, and I thought Lynch was a good try for them and held Bennett pretty well in the first half.
Could I speak to our professional man on the panel? Jared, what is the influence of putting a pain-killing thing in a fella's ankle and sending him back onto the ground? Does he not run the risk of...
Who are you talking about, Bob?
Osborne.
Thank you.
Well, I guess by killing the pain, you're getting rid of the body's protective mechanism, and there is a chance that you can do further damage. But the medical personnel now are pretty aware of this problem, Bob, and I would very much doubt that they'd send a player of any calibre out on the ground if they thought there was a real chance of further damage.
Bobby, we'll put you in the hot seat. Your votes from last night's match at Carrara, Brisbane versus North
Fitzroy, and in the first 10 minutes had booted 3 goals. Jim Steins and Steve O'Dwyer posed a problem changing in the pocket, and in a new jumper, former St Kilda player Rod Owen was doing things at will. It wasn't until late in the quarter when Fitzroy's John Blakey scored their first. Melbourne opened the second term like they'd began, and it became a one-horse race, with on-ballers Greg Healy and Todd Viney finding space. Fitzroy was struggling, and when new skipper Richard Osborne left the ground, it was a sorry sight at half-time. The Demons up by 75 points. In the third term, Melbourne continued on their merry way, consistently winning the ball out of the middle. In the final quarter, Fitzroy tried to put some respect into their score, but it was to no avail. Melbourne home by 131 points.
In golf,
tomorrow and will miss the rest of the year after tearing his anterior cruciate ligament against St Kilda. It's a double blow for the Healy family, with big brother Gerard forced out of the game last year with an arthritic wrist. After a top first quarter, Greg Healy thought he was in for a big afternoon at the MCG until he felt his knee give late in the first quarter. But Healy, who gave up the club captaincy last year to concentrate on his own form, played on until midway through the second quarter when his knee completely gave way.
Giving the captaincy to Gary sort of made things a bit easier, and I was, as I said, setting myself for a big year, but this has come along, so I'll have to set my sights on 92 now.
Well, what is actually wrong?
I've torn the anterior cruciate ligament, so that entails a full knee reconstruction, so I can kiss 91.
Gaskell has been in the wars breaking her finger playing netball.
Look, at the other side of things, we've both been pretty lucky. We've been in the game for 10 years or so and played in finals, and myself in a grand final. He's won a Brownlow medal, so, you know, I guess we were due for a turn of bad luck, but we just got to make the most of things that come around.
Then, in the second term, he fell awkwardly, and there was no way he could continue.
I initially did it, and I thought I might have just, you know, something went wrong with the knee. I wasn't too sure what it was, and went down the forward pocket, as you said, and tried to change direction a couple of times, and it just collapsed.
When Healy is operated on tomorrow, he'll become the 6th Melbourne player in 12 months to be sidelined with a knee reconstruction. But showing all the courage that earned him the captaincy in the first place, Healy says his boots won't be hung up for good.
You know, there's always that 10% chance that they might be wrong, so I'm just say a few prayers tonight and hopefully it'll all come off for me.
The early loss of Healy yesterday effectively left Melbourne with only 19 players, and that's helped reopen the debate over the two-man interchange. Demon coach John Northey and his St Kilda counterpart Ken Sheldon have both called for the league to allow 3 players on the bench.
Anterior cruciate ligament away from the bone.
I think I basically knew it was gone, and I'd prepared myself for the worst, so just got to get it right.
Healy's a long-term problem, but more immediate for the Demons, who have only won 1 out of 3, is this week's game against the informed Carlton. Michael Roberts, 7.
Hard to beat, aren't they? 72 points. The D's by 45 with a spectacular. The match ratio is the first figure we look at. West Coast, Essendon, Geelong, all unbeaten. Then you've got the points and the percentages. The Cats play Brisbane today, and if they win and win by a substantial margin, they could replace Essendon in second position. Hawthorn with the bye this weekend, Carlton and Collingwood making up the top 6. But because of the bye situation, I reckon you've got to wait, what, on Jackson. Stephen Stretch had his nose broken yesterday. I think Simon Eichel broke a thumb. Gary Lyon was injured. His
kids running everywhere. Well, St Kilda have sent a confidential letter to Melbourne asking them to join them at the Moorabbin Arena. Of course, the MCG is sort of out of bounds for Melbourne during the week. They're having trouble getting a training ground. They're playing on a little bit of parkland down at the Albert Park. The Albert Park Committee of Management won't come to terms with them. And St Kilda reckon in a few years they'll have a stadium worth of $100 million down there. By the way, apart from Melbourne, they've also gone up to the Rugby League, and they've asked the Rugby League which teams look like being dropped out or relocated from the Rugby League, and they've sent letters also to the top Rugby League clubs in Sydney asking them to join, but they prefer Melbourne. So it could be a bit of a deal for them.
Plenty happening there, and just finally the interchange players.
Like he could have been the difference, but they actually couldn't get the ball up to him in that final term. I gave Earl Spalding too. I thought he typified the Melbourne fighting spirit, and he was a great inspiration for them at both centre-half back and centre-half forward, and I thought Todd Viney likewise was the real prime mover behind Melbourne, particularly after quarter time. But early in the game, it was passages of play like we're going to see here. We see Phillips gets the ball down to Bond on the half-forward line, and there really wasn't a lot of contact in this particular passage of play, and over to Hannah, who finishes off with a nice goal. And as I said, it just typified the proceedings at that particular time. And Silvani, of course, gets it across to David Kernahan there, who again down to Hannah on the half-forward line. He was running right, and he chips it across. And Bradley will come in here. You see, reads the ball perfectly off the pack here, and another nice goal. And this was early in the second term. It looked like it was going to be all Carlton. But as I said, credit to the Melbourne side, great persistence show and character. And they did man up after quarter time. It was old-fashioned hard work that really paid dividends in the end.
Keller, apparently a few people felt that Melbourne were fortunate that Dave Dwyer went off because it enabled Steins to come in and do very well. Is that the case?
Well, on yesterday's performance, and you'd have to say yes, I thought Steins took it upon himself. He was another player, lucky not to be in the votes, I suppose, worked very hard, and I think seems to work or play much better under those circumstances. I mean, the ruck play was nearly negated one another as far as the actual tap-outs went, Madden, but he worked very hard and was a great player around the ground for them with shin guards.
When Hannah was dominating the game in the first, in the first 3 quarters, obviously, did anyone ever go and pick him up? I mean, weren't you told to be, if it's an outstanding player, didn't you go and, if he's the best player in the ground, didn't you go and beat him or play against him?
He's got a defender, the defender's on him. Now, we saw there where the defender made...
Where did the defender get to,
Excuse me,
Aren't supposed to run with your man nowadays. You don't do that anymore.
Excuse me, Bob, we saw it on the film there that once the defender left Hannah to go to tackle the ball carrier and it was handball over his head. Now, that was an error of judgment.
But unfortunately...
Originally, he was with his man.
Yeah, unfortunately, he was caught out a little bit, had to run in, and the handball went over the top. Another young player I'd like to make mention of was young Kevin Dyson, who had quite an influence when I thought come on the ground and got a lot of hard balls out of the centre.
Just in 2 words, Carlton and Melbourne, will they both make the 6?
Yes, I think they might.
Good. We'll take a break. Back with more.
They can take a splendid mark.
This next one might look easy, but it is not. A diving mark by Glenn Lovett took it well low to the ground.
Another exciting young player to come into the scene so far is young Darren Cuthbertson, who completes probably an average mark by Stephen standards.
And Melbourne have got a great forward line. Look at Darren Bennett. He's one of the stars up there, a top 4 forward and a very, very strong mark. And Keller was pretty difficult, wasn't it?
It was a lot.
Gets himself up early, 3 or 4 players in the pack and a good, strong mark.
That mark is now a finalist in the Mitsubishi Motors AFL Mark of the Year. The prize for this year's winner is the Mitsubishi Magna SE with a new level of sophistication never before seen in an Australian vehicle.
Yes, that's something...
It's gone from St Kilda to Melbourne, and this is, you could not get a better kick than that.
Now this will be a classy goal by Graham Yates. Shows a lot of class the way he holds the ball out, then goes onto his non-preferred foot, normally a right foot kick. Goes onto it quickly. He's got a lot of class, this fellow, a lot of speed.
Something right sometimes, Ron, and it was a very important part of the game. Bennett, 18, leads the goal kicker. Sumich and Dunstall, 17. Dorotich having a terrific year, 16. Hogg, 15. Naish, and good to see Kappa on 12. Don Scott's the only one going for Brisbane
Melbourne
today.
rover Luke Beveridge during an 11-goal last-term blitz by the Demons at VFL Park. Michael Roberts, 7 Nightly News.
And we've just heard from John.
It was a terrific match against Sydney by 31 points. Footscray in the upset by 11 points yesterday out of Waverley against Hawthorn. Collingwood had a struggle against the Bears. They got there in the end by 22 points. Richmond breaking their duck by 24 points. And the Demons were very, very impressive. 70-point winners over the Kangaroos of the MCG.
Now it's time to check the CUB AFL ladder.
And the ladder with the Bombers on top. West Coast, Geelong, Collingwood, Carlton, St Kilda. We're going to talk about this ladder in a couple of minutes' time with Scotty Palmer, so just take note of that. Melbourne a kick from that incident. Here's Jimmy Steins. Jimmy will be along a bit later on. He had the last laugh yesterday because he had a magnificent match against North Melbourne. He really did play very, very well indeed. A big bump there was Turitsky and Spalding. Cuthbertson, what a good game he had, with 7 goals. Playing 8 on Friday night. Cuthbertson 7 yesterday. And the Demons...
Go 3 to Jimmy Steins. 2 to Kevin Dyson playing in the middle for Melbourne, and 1 to the former St Kilda player Rod Owen playing on the half-forward flank, and he kicked 5 goals.
So Steins in pretty good form.
Yes, it started in the middle for Melbourne in that first quarter. What a quarter that was. They kicked 9 goals, 1 each, both sides. 18 goals, 2 for the term. So they virtually kicked there's been a scoring shot every minute and a half for the first quarter. The only problem player that played a reasonably poor game was Stretch, and he ended up at some stage in the back pocket. But Jimmy Steins dominated the ruck, had plenty of the ball, nearly 30 possessions, 14 hit-outs. He kicked 1 goal right on the final siren. They won it out of the middle very well and drove it down to the forward line where they made it very easily for Owen. Bennett didn't have a great day. He only kicked 2 goals, or 3 goals. He kicked 1 in the end. But his game, well, I think Melbourne's game was so much better because they weren't relying on the full forward. They had so many options in that forward line, and it also made it so very easy for the Melbourne defenders.
Now, Bernie, it's getting very serious times for North Melbourne. I mean, they're absolutely getting thrashed in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Obviously, there's a lot of looseness in their play. Is it from their defence or their on-ballers? I mean, Viney and Jimmy here got possession galore. They manned up.
Look, Melbourne were totally committed yesterday, Ron, and I think that's where it came out. They were just so more committed than North Melbourne. It really started in the middle. Gallagher is a player who competes all the time, but he is very slow. He lacks agility, he lacks pace. Jimmy just, with his athleticism, ran him around, and that was the end of it. And it all started there. Dyson, number 34 in the March draft, and he's had nearly 30 possessions out of the middle. He's had 2 games at 2 tries at other clubs, and yet he killed them yesterday out of the middle.
Bernie, you mentioned Darren Bennett didn't have a great day. I saw him last week and was impressed with the way he went about his game. He kicked 3, I think, last week as well, but probably meant 6 or 7 to his side. You think he's working hard. I mean, I was always brought up under the way that a full forward's job is not only to kick goals, but to see the goals are kicked. Now, was that evident again yesterday?
It was evident. Kelly played very well, Darren Bennett. He took a few great marks and he was prepared to pass them off from just outside the 50-metre mark when he probably could have made the distance without any problem. So he played a very unselfish game.
Bernie, I saw Melbourne in America last year play against the West Coast and very impressed with young Cuthbertson.
Very good, Peter. 7 goals at full, forward pocket. And the good thing about it, Darren Bennett gets the best player from North Melbourne defence yesterday, which was Martin, and he has a smaller player to play on. He moves around well, he kicks well, took some great marks, and I couldn't fit him in for a vote, unfortunately, but I apologise to him for that.
But you did fit in, Bernie, Jimmy Steins.
I did fit Jimmy Steins in.
Who's joined us right now.
He was magnificent. Yes, I was just wondering, Jimmy, also, do you think there's room in the side for the 2 big blokes? There's a lot of conjecture about that, you and Steve O'Dwyer.
Yeah, there's been a bit about that. I think there is, because like yesterday I got pretty tired there for a while, because there was a lot of running to do, and I knew with Gallagher and Harris, you know, the only way I could get away from was just to keep running all day.
Jimmy, that's not Steve on your lap though, is it?
No.
Young Dale. So we've got one of the biggest demons and the smallest demon on your...
Well, this guy's going to take over from Greg Healy when he gets a bit bigger.
Jimmy, part of your game, as you just said, is running around all day. Now, that means you've got to be really up for the game, because it is plain hard work. Well, it's more than that, it's a thrill as well. Does this explain a little bit why you've been up and down this year, that you've been perhaps not quite as committed on some days and therefore had a bad day? What's the reason for your up and down form?
Well, I wouldn't say it's up and down. I started off in the night competition a bit slower, because they were using me on ruck roving and things like that. But the West Coast Eagles game, I thought I was being played out of position, but now I've been playing forward pocket on the ball. You know, Steve O'Dwyer was injured this week and last week, so I got a chance to stay on the ball. You know, I like to be able to run and tire out an opponent. But yeah, it doesn't worry me changing and having a rest in the forward pocket or letting Straubs start on the ball or whatever. But I think we can cause problems for oppositions if both of us are playing well. But as it's happened in the past every now and then, if we do lose form, it does. You know, I suppose we can get in the way.
Perhaps you should run instead of run.
Jimmy, back in Ireland, Gaelic football's under a bit of pressure from other sports like our own game. How have they reacted to the Australians coming over and pinching some of their really talented kids?
I suppose there's a twofold effect. We've got a lot of competition from soccer and rugby union, but mainly the soccer, because there's the advantage of if they do well and go over to England and make quite a bit of money. So now I suppose the incentive now is for the kids to stay, and they might get a chance of coming out here and doing well for themselves on an international level. But no, I think that they've done very well, the Gaelic, and they're really getting back to the grassroots and for the kids and getting them back involved. And I think the Australian rules is good for it, especially the tests. You know, it really gets the...
Jimmy, do you think your back line's a little bit more stable now? I notice that Peter Rowe and Stephen Stretch have been out for a couple of weeks, out of the side, dropped, and Tony Campbell back there at fullback. And those players were doing well towards the end of last year in defence.
Yeah, I think we've got a good balance of defenders. You know, some guys, if they're told to do a job, they can do it. You know, other guys are good running players from the back line, and you know, they talk very well, and there's a lot of communication down there. And also with Sean White, who's just came back, he didn't play yesterday, but he's a great advantage for us in the back line as well. And I think we have a good balance, a bit of height, you know, not too tall, not too small.
Jim, Jared brought in your shin guard last week. Are they a necessity, you think?
Yeah, woke me up at 9 o'clock in the morning when I was having a lie. But yeah, well, you know, like I don't have very big legs as it is, and I need every bit of protection I can on my shins. I think, you know, most ruckmen would agree. When you're running against a guy who's coming straight at you and you've got to lift your knee to get off the ground, you do find that you clash shins a lot. And, you know,
they don't hinder you running. I mean, that's part of your game, as you mentioned before. Yeah. You don't find the end of the game these shin guards are starting to be some kind of interference?
I've often wondered about kicking because they're pretty big, you know, and the ball, you're trying to kick it against that because they're fairly low. But I think, you know, the amount of times they've saved me from getting a serious injury, you know, I need them, and I'm sure other ruckmen would agree that they're essential. I don't think that they're a hindrance for other players because I've never kicked anyone with them or anything like that.
They're not a danger for anyone, Jim?
No, I don't think so, no.
Getting back to the performance yesterday, Jim, how do you rate it yourself? And how was John Northey after the game? Do you think you've probably got your best chance for a long time?
Yeah, I think we do. Yesterday, you know, we lost a lot of more experienced players from the side, and you know, we showed a lot of character last week against Carlton, and again this week, you know, we really had to show it. Last year we were beaten by something like 21 goals, and for me that was probably the most humiliating game I've ever played in. And you know, I had a lot to prove that day. I played pretty bad too, and there was a lot of pressure there, and most of the guys knew it, and we. You know, losing players is an even more incentive, and to play well for guys like Greg Healy and Gary Lyons, Steve O'Dwyer, Simon Ishow, Sean, you know, who and some of them had to actually pull themselves out of the game.
Pretty well off the depth, Jim, would you say, this year?
Yeah, we do.
As well off as ever?
Yeah, especially at the beginning of the season. This year, like I've been with the club now 6 years, and I think this year is our greatest depth ever. You know, I think we'll go on.
Jim, John Northey was criticised by many people over the recruitment of Rod Owen, myself included, but on yesterday's form, it could turn out to be one of the recruiting coups of the 90s.
Yeah, I think he's done very well. His attitude to the football is just fantastic. You know, he's curbed his, I suppose, bad habits he's had elsewhere, and he's really got his mind on it. You know, and he helps the younger guys, and he's kicking goals now. We want him to be kicking 2 or 3 goals a game, and if he kicks 5, well, that's a bonus.
What are those bad habits you're talking about?
No, well,
I was going to say, I think
Sean Zantok said something one night.
Jim, after Jared arrived at the Sydney Cricket Ground, I think Peter McKinnon just explained all of his bad habits anyway. Jim, thanks for coming in.
That's a bit low.
Thanks for coming in. Good luck for the rest of the year. You've been so close yet so far on a couple of occasions. And Dale, who's your favourite footballer?
Jim.
Oh, I thought you might say that, mate. Good luck. Good on you, Jimmy.
Yeah, thanks.
Jimmy Steins, who had a wonderful game yesterday, and Bernie Quinlan gave him the 3 votes. We'll take a break now. A remarkable game at the MCG. North Melbourne by 54 over Sydney after trailing by 5 goals at half-time. West Coast by 45 over Geelong. A contest for about a quarter and a half, and then they got on top. Carlton, look to the left, that's the amount of games that the teams have played. So you can see that Melbourne and Collingwood are the only 2 teams to have played 6 matches. The first figure after the team's name is their match ratio. West Coast, Essendon both with 100, and the final figure is the percentage. So the 6 at the moment: West Coast, Essendon, Geelong, Melbourne, Carlton and Collingwood. Hawthorn have got a great chance of going in there today. They play Fitzroy, and the other game, Footscray and Adelaide. A pretty important one for both of those teams, as you can see, as we look at some of the highlights from this brilliant round. And speaking of brilliance, has this young man set footballer like Cuthbertson for the 2nd consecutive week, 7 goals, and the way he can win the ball 1 out was fascinating on Thursday. Interesting one here. Keogh didn't look fit enough to take his kick. Peter Cameron insisted he did. I think he handed it over to Ford, and Keogh missed that. He kicked a point from about 25 metres out.
But if his leg's not right...
And as Pete McKenna says, if his leg's not right, here's Cuthbertson again, 1 out against Banks this time. He beat 2 or 3 different opponents, and he's given John Northey an extra dimension. Off Melbourne and Collingwood. Great game for 2.5 quarters, and Bernie Quinlan and Ron Barassi were 2 of the panel that were out there, Bernie.
Yes, Bruce, well, Melbourne played particularly well, and they've shown that the form against North Melbourne the week before was no fluke. And a couple of very impressive players coming into that side. I gave the votes to Darren Cuthbertson, and he's one of the players who's been very impressive. 7 goals against North Melbourne, and now another 7 goals against Collingwood. Brett Lovett playing across that half-back line as steady as ever. He continually drove Melbourne into the forward line. And Todd Viney, the other player I gave a vote to, who's having a great season across the centre line on the ball. Added a lot of strength, I think, Ron, to the Melbourne side. Really, with his desperation, is showing the way to a lot of the Melbourne players.
Yes, I didn't give him a vote myself because I felt he didn't do enough with his possession, but and he got caught a bit with the ball. But he has. This is his best year to date, and he is adding a lot of bite around the packs, no question of that. And their stars in attack, even though Owen was quiet, was pretty well. Probably Collingwood should have been in front by a bigger margin early in the game, but it still wouldn't have made any difference to the result.
They did have a lot of chances early in the game and wasted them. There's a player who's not playing well, that's Peter Dacos. He's playing very much in a similar vein to Brad Hardy, I feel, at the moment, Ron, and that is he's not attacking the ball. If he's not kicking 4 or 5 goals, he's doing nothing.
Is he in the comfort zone, dude?
He's in the comfort zone. Well, he was on Thursday, Bob.
because he was sitting back waiting for things to happen rather than making things happen himself, and Dacos must lift his game.
Bernie, I was interested to read after that game, Lee Matthews mentioned there may be 12, even 14 players that maybe not there to, if they are to fight it out for the flag again this year. Could you name a couple that mightn't be there?
Well, you could go through a lot of the players, I think, on Thursday, Ron. I think...
well, Tony Shaw was quiet, but
Tony Shaw was very
put him
quiet.
under any sort of question, could you, really?
No,
Often
you
happens
couldn't.
the second game back, though, from injury, doesn't
exactly.
it?
I think...
I think it's important that you mention a guy's name, Dyson, for Melbourne. He's been a very important player on Thursday and the week before.
Very, very competent.
There's just something about Collingwood, Ron. I think their skill level is fairly ordinary at the moment. And Manson is one of those players in the similar vein to Warwick Kappa. When he gets the ball in, no one tries harder than James Manson, but his disposal is shocking.
OK, we'll look at some votes from last Sunday's matches. The
Mitsubishi Magna SE, with a new level of sophistication never seen before in an Australian vehicle.
And there he is. Look, everything was right about the mark.
And here's a mark where not many players could do. He's just done a little push out with the knee, completely legal. And you dominated it, and I just got sick of you talking, so
You've allowed me to select. Well, for everyone that wants to learn as a young fellow marking the ball, if we look at Cuthbertson once again, you'll see that he does everything right. I'll let you, as a modern day fellow, Rod, what is he doing now? What has he done right?
Well, he's had his iron ball, that's the very first thing, and the timing of his leap has been sensational, and he has held the ball all the way down, which you always love to see.
Marvellous.
He's very exciting, isn't he?
He is.
He's the sort of player that you'd really want to go to the footy to have a look at.
Well, he's run out of the blue. I mean, who'd imagine a kid from Epping could suddenly come in and be a superstar?
What's wrong with Epping?
That's too early.
Nothing wrong with Epping.
Nothing wrong. It's in the middle of Collingwood.
Now, remember, you made some comments about Footscray a couple of years ago and got into trouble.
It's in the middle of Collingwood's area. That's why it's sensational.
Oh, thank you, Ron. We've got to go, but we're coming back.
He's off the tackle, and again splits the big timber.
Long kick for number 31.
Very long for 31.
Andrew Ford, a up-and-coming star for the Demons, played on shore most of the day on Anzac Day, but he slipped down there into the forward pocket to kick a very vital goal.
Over to you, Jared, and you can kick the goal, mate.
Thanks very much, Calvin. Well, I'm going to jump
an opportunity to improve his position today. What about those matches, Bob? Adelaide?
That's just the start.
Well, Jono, from the MCG to Timber Ridge Reserve, it's a pretty big change.
Yeah, it certainly is. We've played one game here and would have been about, I'd say, 100 people here, so the change is quite substantial, but relaxing-wise and enjoying it, it's been great.
How have you found the coaching role? You don't appear to have lost any hair yet.
No, actually somebody asked me how it was going the other day and I said, well, we've only played 2 games, but I can see how a coach can say how long a season can be. There's still 16 games to go for us and, I'm quite enjoying it, but certainly there's a little bit more to it than what I thought in work-wise.
Coping with the players' different levels of dedication and skill must be quite difficult.
Yeah, the first night of official training it was a bit hard because there are a lot of guys that were unable to turn up for various reasons, work functions, parties that were on, or they're going away for a trip for the weekend, so that made it a bit difficult, and those type of excuses I suppose I've got to get to accept.
Any aspirations at an AFL level coaching job?
Oh, Jared, that's for me that's a long way off. I think if I can get through this year and have a reasonably good year this year, I'll be quite happy and I'll look at it from there.
John, it must have been a real temptation when Melbourne began with their overtures not so long ago. What stopped you from returning to the AFL?
I think family life was one. Wife and little daughter to consider now, and also the pressures of work and also the pressure of playing at that level. I've been involved for 18 years, certainly not full-time here, but in Perth for 9 and 9 here. After a time of that, it got to me a bit. It wasn't to say that I wasn't enjoying it, because I was. Also the injuries, and I think that speaks for themselves over the last fair few years I've had with hammies and hip type problems. So towards the end of last year I had a severe one, and I didn't think I'd come up, but it's gradually getting better, and I'm sort of pacing myself now, and I can get through it.
Jono has obviously made a big impact in a short period of time at his new club.
He's doing a good job. He likes the club, he likes the blokes, and he's enjoying the football, and there's no pressure on him.
He's created a great amount of impact to the whole club with enthusiasm. Guys respect him. It's made a bit of a difference.
Would you be surprised to see him back at Melbourne?
I think when I see him at half-time after he's trying to collect his bumps and bruises, I would be surprised to see him back at Melbourne.
Melbourne supporters live in the hope that Jono will one day return to the MCG. But is that view shared by the match committee?
Good players with experience are hard to come by, and while there's still an inkling of Alan Johnson wanting to come back to Melbourne, we'll retain him on our list.
And Jono, any truth in the rumour that has you playing at Melbourne in 1992?
No truth at all, Jared.
You believe him, Ross? No chance at all going back? I guess you've got to make a decision.
Younger, perhaps give it a shot, but he's made that decision. He's old in terms of body capabilities, and whilst his mind might be sprightly, he's just got to give it away, and he's done the right thing.
OK, sport coming up on 7.
Darren Bennett played just the first quarter and it was anyone's game at half-time. It was the Demons, however, who ran away with it by 39.
Point victory over Footscray. Charles kicked 4 for the Dogs. O'Dwyer, Owen and Jackson 3 each for the Demons. Final score 17-19, 121 to 12-10, 82. Footscray scored first into the win. Brownlow medalist Tony Liberatore goaling on the run. But Melbourne dominated the quarter through a forward line prepared to share the ball. If it wasn't Bennett receiving, it was Bennett giving.
Jackson, great goal.
It rained at the start of the second quarter. It was slippery for most, but not for Leon Cameron, who kicked a miraculous goal.
Have a look at it for a shot at goal. That will take...
Some handled the conditions better than others, and the game tightened up to be a real thriller with Footscray getting back into it. Doug Hawkins, in his 250th, put on a show for the crowd. After another freakish goal from the pocket, the Demons led by only 7.
Let's celebrate 250 in style.
Terry Wallace spent the first half on the bench. When he got a run, he helped Footscray draw level. But Melbourne pulled away, kicking 5 goals to 2 in the third term to set up a 39-point victory.
Well, we've seen some miraculous goals.
To the goal kickers, and the Eagles' Peter Sumich booted 5 today for a total of 38. Jason Dunstall will be missing for several weeks. He has 34. Darren Bennett moves to 33. Warwick Capper, 26. Melbourne's Darren Cuthbertson, 25. And North Melbourne's John Longmire and Geelong's Billy Brownless have 24. The ladder. And the Eagles now the clear leaders in the competition with 7 wins out of 7. Essendon is second, just ahead of Melbourne. St Kilda and Collingwood, which both play tomorrow, are 4th and 5th, and Hawthorn moves back into the 6th spot. Then follows Geelong, North Melbourne, Sydney, Carlton, Footscray and Adelaide. Richmond...
Reviewing from Hawthorn's point of view. Hawkins, and who kicked this one? Was it Hawkins or Charles? Charles it was. He kicked 4 yesterday. But Dougie was in good form early. This is a brilliant goal. Well, Hawkins special, this one. Sets himself on the left-hand side and able to put it through. Brilliant goal. And they were certainly in the game, Footscray, in the first half. But Dougie just saluting. But this goal by Jackson, this little touch, put Melbourne in front, and they were not headed after that. Some terrific highlights, particularly from...
Halfway through the third quarter, it was anybody's game, but they had the personnel to throw around, which Northey did, and in the end they ran out easy winners.
Yeah, they did it well. And Peter McKenna, we can get carried away at the moment, but that...
It wasn't a bad game up until about halfway through that third quarter, when Footscray looked as if they were coming back, but unfortunately they made a couple of mistakes. First of all, the votes. I gave 3 votes to Jimmy Steins, who played another magnificent game in the ruck, and around the half-back line as a loose man in defence. Todd Viney, who's turned into one of the best ruck rovers playing the game at the moment, had about 32 possessions. And, well, I suppose another ruckman, which is a bit strange, I gave Scott Wind, the opposing ruckman, 1 vote. Don't say that, Peter.
Well, they played on each other.
Well, Scott Wind won the knockouts and did very well in defence for Footscray. Jimmy Steins didn't win the knockouts, but also played across the half-back line as a loose man in defence, took 13 marks, had over 30 possessions, and was the best man on the ground. But Scotty Wine, for what he did, was magnificent also.
You couldn't fit Liberatore and Coleman in there, Bernie.
Libba had plenty of possessions yesterday, but unfortunately he didn't have much influence on the game, and Coleman was well held by Gary Lyon in the first half, and really gave away a couple of silly free kicks and a 50-metre penalty that was, well, it could have been costly. Phoebe missed the goal, but he wants to just remember, forget arguing with the umpire and just get on with the game.
Well, Bernie, it's just well spoken from a Brownlow medalist, but Jim Steins took 14 marks and Wine 10. And were they against each other?
No, well, the thing think the strange thing about it was that Steins was taking the ruck.
You don't do that today, Ron. You know that. You don't play on one another.
It's amazing ruckman. I found, I played in the ruck a few times when I couldn't get a kick at full forward, and to go into the ball, a lot of times, right? Yeah. To go into the ball, it was a relief at times because you didn't have that pressure of the opposing ruckman. You know, they're very lazy people, the ruckmen, and they do not pick up their opponents. And they need to be told by the coach.
Or rovers or ruck rovers.
Or rovers or ruck rovers. That's why they get 30-odd possessions.
Jared the ones that
look disgusted, but that's what happens.
Bernie, I wish Don Scott was here when you mentioned that about lazy ruckman.
Turned over his
Bernie, how do you rate Melbourne?
Melbourne, I'd say, are in the top 3 at the moment. Can
they take the extra step, Bernie? They've been promising
I thought they could a couple of weeks ago. They've got very good backup strength, I think, Bruce. You know, Bennett went off yesterday and they virtually didn't miss him. He kicked 2 goals in that first quarter. Incidentally, Gow did a good job at fullback. I think Footscray have found a fullback. He was very good at fullback. But they can switch their side around. Like Lyon started at centre-half back, went to centre-half forward. O'Dwyer was at centre-half forward early. They've got White, who they can throw to centre-half back. O'Dwyer down to full forward. So they've got the personnel. They can just switch around and can find winners at various stages of the game when they need to.
Steve O'Dwyer and Cuthbertson, what was their performance?
Well, Cuthbertson was well held by Eccleston, who's in the state squad. He did a magnificent job on him. But they still have the ability, the Melbourne players, to pop up and kick a couple of goals, and Cuthbertson did this yesterday. Owen kicked 3 goals, but I thought he was beaten by Michael Ford, who played a good game.
OK, after the break, Geelong, North Melbourne with Ron Barassi. Dash there with 7 and Turley with 7. So the top 4, and then there's a number of players on 6 votes.
The AFL Mark of the Year prize is the Mitsubishi Magna SE, with a new level of sophistication never seen before in an Australian vehicle.
Jared and Curl to have a look at the marks of the week.
Yes, and firstly we see Bouncing Billy taking a beauty, thrilling the Sydney crowd. And that arms over the top.
Is just sensational football.
Yeah, that was a magnificent goal from Leon. And another one we see here from the old champ, Dougie Hawkins, playing his 250th game. A very similar goal this time, on the boundary line again, on the left foot. And it's quite amazing. We saw some amazing goals there at the MCG yesterday. The same sort of kick on the left boot from the boundary line.
Now, this is a true Rovers one coming up. You'll see it in a moment. O'Dwyer gets it out to little Ricky Jackson on the left foot from the boundary. He's happy. Look at that. Great goal.
And the player we were talking about a little bit earlier, Greg Williams.
34. Melbourne's Darren Bennett has 33, and he's been joined by Richmond's Jeff Hogg, who booted 10 today. Warwick Kappa, 26, Darren Cuthbertson, 25. The ladder. The West Coast Eagles, the clear leaders with a perfect record. Essendon is 2nd, Melbourne 3rd, St Kilda 4th, Hawthorn and Geelong make up the top 6. Then follows North Melbourne, Collingwood, Sydney, Carlton, Footscray, Adelaide and Richmond. Brisbane and Fitzroy look like fighting it out for them.
Well, after the bye last week?
Yes, well, they're putting that well behind them. It's been handy for a couple of players, one in particular, Darren Bennett, Drew. But the Melbourne players are very, very determined. It's a vital game for them. They're going for their 6th successive win, and if they are to stay in touch with the runaway West Coast Eagles, they must win tonight. Likewise, a very important game for the Adelaide Crows at home with this parochial crowd. Let's take this preview from Steve Titmus.
The biggest rumour doing the rounds today was the Demon full forward Darren Bennett would not play tonight, but he was among the Melbourne team on arrival, and coach John Northey made it definite.
Well, certainly if played, we wouldn't bring anybody over. I don't think any clubs have the money to throw around to bring players over and not play them.
Bennett will come up against former teammate Danny Hughes, but his thoughts on the clash were kept to himself, with the Demons refusing player interviews. One player not seen was former Port Adelaide star Andrew Obst, who's been on the injured list for 10 weeks, but has now recovered. But Obst had caught an earlier flight, and Northey did not rule out playing the talented ruck rover.
He is an emergency. He's in Adelaide, so, you know, if somebody was ill from now until the game, perhaps we'd look at him.
Weather-wise, here at Football Park in South Australia, there could be rain a little bit later on in the evening, but it should be a great game. Drew, getting underway at 8:30.
Look forward to it.
Adelaide has reshuffled its back lines to include Danny Hughes at fullback against his old club, while Adelaide vice-captain Tony McGuinness believes the Crows' shattering loss to North Melbourne last week has taught Adelaide a valuable lesson.
The morale is still very high, and I think rather than losing confidence, the guys have gained confidence from that game, and guys now believe that we can match it with the best, be it in Adelaide or in Melbourne.
Tomorrow. Both sides have suffered injuries to top players after Tuesday's State of Origin match, but the hard-hit Bombers have at least regained a couple of their top contributors.
Look at this.
The return of Paul Salmon after a groin injury and Michael Long, who's recovered from hurt ribs, is certain to help Essendon, still on a high after last week's win over St Kilda at Moorabbin. The inform Ian McMullen says once again the backline will play a vital role in the outcome.
Our defence has worked pretty well as a unit all year, so I think we'll just, like every other week, just again work together as a unit and do our best.
Melbourne needs to bounce back after a somewhat surprising loss to Adelaide, but according to defender Peter Rode, it will have to be without Gary Lyon.
Any chance of him playing, he would have been named in the team. I mean, I'm sure that, you know, Essendon probably haven't decided about a few of their players just yet, and if there was a chance of Gary playing, he would have been in the 20 or certainly the 23.
Bomber coach Kevin Sheedy hinted that he may start Simon Madden on the bench after the veteran having to play 2 games in 4 days.
We'll see how Simon comes up after a state game where, you know, that he's 33, played 360 games, 70 games sort of thing. It's a lot of games. He may start on the bench, I'm not sure yet.
To the tips for round 11, ground invasion at Windy Hill. On Saturday, Melbourne's Stephen Clark had a kick after the siren, which, if he goaled, would have tied the match. Melbourne believe Clark was unfairly impeded. However, the league say the result will stand. The league says there is no precedent for changing the decision. Melbourne, also claim it was possible that a spectator did not touch the ball, rather than Essendon player first. Under Rule 17.4, if a spectator marks or stops the ball, the game is over. If a spectator assists the ball over the scoring line, the game is over. If it is deflected over the line by a spectator, the game is over. Therefore...
Remarkable achievement. Irishman Jim Steins not only reaches the ton this week, he leads most of the media awards and is one of the favourites for the Brownlow medal. Drew Moffat reports.
Steins has made a superb transition from the Gaelic game to Australian football. He arrived here in November 1984 as an 18-year-old rookie who had never played our footy. New country, new game, but he makes it sound easy.
It's like Gaelic footy, it's fairly similar, you know, you follow the plays similarly. The ball's different, the tackling's different, there's a few different rules, but, you know, if you can play one, you'll play the other fairly easily.
He hasn't been dropped since his first senior season, 1987. He became famous that year for costing Melbourne a place in the grand final when he ran across the mark, and Gary Buckenara's kick after the siren won the preliminary final. This week, it's same opponent, same venue, Hawthorn at VFL Park.
That day I played my 13th game, so that was an unlucky number for some. And now I'm playing 100, so, you know, it's a long way down the track, and hopefully the scores won't be so close at the end, and we'll be a good few goals in front, so it won't matter.
And the Demons need victory to break a 4-game losing streak. Drew Moffat, 7 Nightly News.
And are headed for a Wednesday showdown with the AFL over the new draft rules. The local clubs have banded together because they believe they are not being looked after at the expense of the interstate teams. In a rare show of solidarity, the AFL clubs have reacted angrily to the rules the league hoped to push through for the 1992 season.
I thought this was a secret.
The clubs met today at North Melbourne Social Club after being disappointed that the original plan for an uncompromised draft had been changed to take in a number of concessions for the interstate clubs.
I think, in a way, the goalposts have been moved since March, and that the second document, the latest one, is different significantly from the one that was presented to us in March.
We just believe this document that came out the second time didn't have a great deal of relevance to the first one.
I think it's a very critical meeting for Victoria.
The loss to Geelong last Monday was the Demons' 4th defeat in a row, and Harvey Silvers says a poor attitude among players is putting a finals berth at risk.
After enduring 20 years in the wilderness, Melbourne has become accustomed to being in elite company. Since 1987, the Demons have been regular finalists, getting as far as the grand final in 1988. But this year there's a strong feeling within the club that the players have been surviving on those past deeds. Coach John Northey has declared that too many of his charges have inflated opinions of their ability, and the hard work ethic has been replaced by oversized egos. Now the Demons are perilously placed, and captain Gary Lyon realises the season could slip away before the players wake up to the danger.
It's a desperate time of the year. There's, as I say, we're running out of weeks. Probably 10 or so to go, and we just have to get wins on the board.
Lyon missed last week's loss to Geelong through suspension. He returns for Saturday's clash with Hawthorn, skippering a side that's low on confidence and cannot afford another defeat.
We work hard to try and keep a positive feeling around the place, and it's hard work when you're not putting wins on the board. You know, 4 weeks now, this is probably a longer time as we've gone without a win for a number of years.
But the Demons don't have to look back a long way for inspiration. In last year's final round and again in the elimination final, they scored gutsy wins over Hawthorn to keep their season alive. This week's game is just as important for survival. Harvey Silver, National 9 News.
Suffering a fractured skull in round 9 last year, and Dermot Brereton and Peter Schwab both having their numbers taken for striking in the same match. This time in, though, the Demons have lost their last 4 games, a factor which coach John Northey really can't explain.
We've had that bye, and since then we have been reasonably competitive, but not as strongly competitive over the 4 quarters, and we've generally failed in 1 quarter, and it's really cost us the game. So what we have to work on is just playing for the whole 4 quarters as hard as we can.
Hawthorn did bounce back last week, but against the salad-welling Bears as a yardstick, perhaps it wasn't that convincing. Saturday could well tell the story, and coach Alan Joyce knows that only too well.
As I said, our form last week was pleasing, and with a fairly well a full contingent, probably without Dunstall again, but
Just come for the Melbourne Football Club. After losing their last 4 in a row after coming off the bye, the Demons have crashed out of the 6. This Saturday they play Hawthorn, who are just ahead of them on the ladder. The result could well decide the fate of both teams for 1991.
You know, these are really the games you've got to set the foundation to make the 6, and it's just very, very disappointing at the moment.
Coming back for the Demons this week, their champion captain Gary Lyon and Simon Eishold, Darren Cuthbertson, whose early season form has faded, and South Australian recruit Alan Jakovic, who gets his second chance to work next to Darren Bennett across the full forward line. Another who has a chance is young rover Fabian Francis. And while Melbourne will miss Steve O'Dwyer with a hamstring and probably Stephen Clark with a neck injury, Northey is looking for a general improvement in all his team's play.
What we really need to work on it is getting consistency out of every player we got on the ground. Even if you're having a bad day, there's still other things out on the ground that they can be doing that perhaps we're not doing. But what we must try and work on and maintain is certainly the consistency.
His head, AFL Investigation Officer Max Croxford said that after viewing the tape, he believed Brereton was intent on going for the ball and no report was warranted. No such reprieve for teammate Gary Ayres, who was booked for striking on Saturday and faced the tribunal tonight.
There was insufficient evidence to warrant a report. At the tribunal tonight, though, the Hawthorn vice-captain Gary Ayres will face a charge of striking Demons defender Brett Lovett with an elbow, also in the first...
5-game losing streak with a magnificent display against the Swans at the Sydney Cricket Ground. The Demons made their move in the 3rd quarter when they kicked 9 goals to 3 and finished the day with a 10-goal final term. Jakovic booted 8 and Bennett 7 for the winners.
Coming off a horror stretch, 5 losses on the trot, Melbourne needed to start well, and it was their skipper Gary Lyon who booted their first.
And sneaks it in for a goal.
Sydney replied quickly when Barry Mitchell found Jason Love with a clever chip to open their account. But the Demons built on their lead when Eishold and Spalding combined, and when Alan Jakovic took this beauty, the visitors led by 19 points at the first change. Coach John Northey demanded the same brand of football, and Darren Bennett didn't let him down, kicking 3 for the quarter. The going had been tough for some players, with Mitchell refusing to lie down for the Swans, kicking 2 on the run.
Fires away, swings it back right through the middle for a goal.
But the second term belonged to the Demons, and they'd stretched their lead to 23 points. After the break, Melbourne continued to be effective, using Bennett and Jakovic to perfection.
Jakovic is going to get this one and buries it.
A great mark by Jim West did salvage something, but another rally by the Demons made the difference 64 points at 3-quarter time.
Bennett breaks one tackle, kicks and goals.
There was no stopping Melbourne in the run home, and they cruised to an 83-point win.
To the ladder, and it's the same old story, with the Eagles on top after this afternoon's win over St Kilda.
Back to Jakovic. And Jakovic will kick a goal on his left foot. Dyson.
Down towards right half forward. Kernahan's in front. Jakovic got the fist on it.
Unless there's a draw at the MCG on Saturday, Mary Jakovic will end up a winner and a loser.
I hope they both play well. And I guess I just have to go for the Eagles. And when Alan's on the ball, I go for Alan.
At just 18, Glenn Jakovic has made a promising start to his AFL career. Eagles coach Mick Malthouse using him in defence. And against Carlton 2 weeks ago, the youngster held Steve Kernahan to just 2 goals. 23-year-old Alan is also playing his first season of AFL, and after some indifferent performances, enjoyed his best game against Sydney last Sunday when he bagged 8 goals. It seems inevitable the brothers will come face-to-face at the MCG on Saturday.
If he's there, clean him up and put him out of the way. But yeah, if I get the chance, he'll know about it, and I guess that's the same on his what he'll be thinking. If he's got the chance to put me out, he will too.
As long as they play fair footy, it'll be great, but I still don't think I'd like to see them on each other, because then I wouldn't know who to go for.
Coast Eagles play their first game of the season on the once-dreaded MCG. The Eagles take on 8th place Melbourne and could go into the match with captain John Worsfold, even though he wasn't named in the team last night.
John Worsfold trained like a man on a mission this morning. After missing the past 2 matches due to a groin strain, the Eagles skipper was out to prove his fitness.
It's going to be up to the selection committee to, you know, what path they want to take, but obviously the 20 guys who played last week did an extremely good job, and it'd be very hard for anyone to miss out.
Worsfold wasn't included in the 20 or named as an emergency, yet travelled to Melbourne, leaving open the possibility of him playing. That will be decided tomorrow morning.
I'd consider myself fit, and I think I could get through a full game.
While the captain remained enthusiastic, the coach was more on the cautious side.
Well, he's very keen to get out there. We've got to be careful not to play him too early.
The Eagles face a fine of $3,000 in the event of Worsfold playing. The AFL's top team went through their paces on a Melbourne-like morning. They have a 4-win, 6-loss record against the Demons. A healthy rivalry has developed between the two teams.
They're a very good side. The last side I'd underestimate would be Melbourne, because I'm an admirer of John Northey's coaching ability.
Clear the injury to the middle finger of Viney's left hand was causing him pain and discomfort. At training tonight, the Demons were reluctant to make any comment on the claims or reveal the identity of the Eagle in question. But the alleged offender will be revealed tomorrow night at a meeting of the AFL's Medical Officers Association. Club doctors are concerned that any biting could lead to the transmission of disease, hepatitis B or even AIDS. I understand the Melbourne medicos will ask for the Eagle concerned to undergo a test for hepatitis B. In fact, their association has recommended to the league that every player in the AFL be vaccinated for the disease. At this stage, the league has no plans to open an inquiry or take any action.
Well, we can't take any unless we have video evidence of it, or somebody at the ground, be it an umpire's advisor, emergency umpire, actually saw the incident.
The biting allegations have sent shockwaves throughout the competition. Aside from the fact it's on a par with kicking an opponent, players are concerned with the health risks.
Well, I think obviously the league have to show a firm hand with it and deal with it quickly and effectively, I think.
The West Coast Eagles were unavailable to comment on the claims. As for Todd Viney, he didn't train tonight. Tony Jones.
Down by 3 points at three-quarter time, the Demons booted 6 goals to 1 in the last term to win by 37 points. But it was the third term that Melbourne's chances of victory were under the most threat. Fitzroy capitalising on unnecessary mistakes by the Demons. But Melbourne steadied, kicking 3 quick majors in the final term and sealed their second win in the last 8 outings. Andrew Bansley, National 9 News.
There, particularly for 3 quarters, but well, the much publicised finger of Todd Viney was well and truly extracted yesterday, and I gave him 3 votes, and I gave the big leprechaun, who's just keeps rolling on, another 2, and another Djakovic. Geez, this guy chock full of talent, and a polished display at full forward. But yeah, it was a hard slog for 3 quarters anyhow, and it was a very persistent Fitzroy that kept them within striking range. But as they tied, I felt in the last term, Melbourne's skill level was able to rise a little, and they were able to put together some very systematic passages of play, and that was I mean, if you looked at the scoreboard, it was emphasised there as they piled on about 6 in their most productive quarter of the game.
Coaches at times try and make these outstanding moves and move backmen to the forward line. Now, what did they do with Paul Roos yesterday? Because I'm the firm believer he's a great player at centre-half back.
Well, he played the entire game at centre-half back and played very well. Was probably Fitzroy's best player, but they probably did the opposite. They took Lynch from full-back, who's probably, I'd say, nearly the best full-back at the moment. He started up in the forward line with limited success, and actually, unfortunately, had his number taken at some stage. So, I mean, unfortunately for Fitzroy, they've got to try something, and I mean, they haven't. Only those players look capable of kicking goals for them.
Cal, every week we see Steins in the votes. Looking to 1992, is there any room for O'Dwyer and Steins in the same side?
Oh, you know, especially. It's sort of limited O'Dwyer, I think, particularly with Bennett up forward and now Djakovic. I think Stein seems to be able to do it by himself, and the trend now seems to be for a lot of sides to have those mobile ruckmen, and Steins is probably the best at that right at the minute. So, you know, you couldn't really see O'Dwyer fitting into their pattern right at the moment.
Have they destroyed Bennett?
at centre?
Oh, I don't think so. I think they're both combining very well. If he hadn't have been so inaccurate, although a lot of kicks from a long way out, he could have kicked his 4 or 5. So I think they're combining very well. Where the one plays full forward pocket, they'll be able to shuffle that about.
Djakovic kicked 6-7. I think Bennett won 6 or something yesterday,
and
wasn't
he does kick with his right foot, Bruce.
Djakovic, right. Yes. Thank you very much for that, Kelvin. Ron Barassi, Essendon have lost 4 of their last 5. They've been in the top 3 for about 14 weeks, and suddenly we're saying they might miss the 6.
Well, for a long while.
Failed to win at home after being beaten in a thriller by Melbourne this afternoon. And in winning by a point, the Demons kept alive their finals hopes. They were again well served by spearhead Alan Djakovic, who has now averaged 7 goals a match for the past month after booting 8 today. Sandy Roberts reports.
The Moorabbin ground was in surprisingly good condition as the visitors Melbourne set about building an early lead. While Gary Lyon was proving dangerous up forward, some undisciplined play by the Saints let the Demons in. But midway through the quarter, the tempo of the game picked up and the Saints came back. They started to team together and began to show far more urgency. And by the first change, Melbourne's lead was cut to just 4 points.
Back with a breeze. Yes!
Quick thinking off the ground by Jim Steins resulted in a goal. But 2 minutes later, the Saints hit the front for the first time when Hilton snapped truly from the pocket. For Melbourne, Russell Morris was proving a stumbling block across half forward. While at the other end of the ground, Alan Djakovic was in superb touch, booting 4 to half-time, but the Demons trailed by 5 points. Djakovic continued his great form, booting 4 goals in the third quarter. Although Melbourne had the breeze, they were playing the more disciplined football, and when Beveridge goaled late in the quarter, the Demons had opened up a 19-point lead. The last quarter was frantic. Lockett came into the game with some power marking and 2 quick goals, but the pressure of playing catch-up football had taken its toll, and in the end, Melbourne snuck home by 1 solitary point. Sandy Roberts, 7 Nightly News.
And Collingwood are keeping the patrols.
And Black & Decker supplying $10,000 for the Football of the Year, plus $5,000 worth of...
This player, he is a fine pack, Mark. Very strong indeed.
Well, David Grant here takes one of these trademarks. Does about 3 of them a week, but unfortunately...
Stop using that word too much, I guess.
Thursday, when the AFL reopens the case. Lewis was rubbed out after being found guilty of biting, but Harvey Silver says the Eagles claim to have new medical evidence which they hope will clear his name.
A fortnight ago, Chris Lewis became the first league player to be suspended for biting an opponent. The West Coast forward was outed for 3 matches after this much publicised incident with Todd Viney in the round 16 match against Melbourne. A top-level meeting of Eagles officials 2 days later hatched the...
To reopen the Chris Lewis case. After receiving new medical evidence from the West Coast Eagles, the tribunal will reconvene on Thursday afternoon. Lewis was found guilty of biting Melbourne ruck rover Todd Viney on the finger in the round 16 game at the MCG, in the AFL's first known biting incident. He was brought to face the tribunal and was suspended for 3 club matches after the league's assistant investigation opened
the Carlton at Princes Park. Alan Djakovic continued his sensational form by kicking 7 goals, but the bad news was the report of Gary Lyon. Drew Morford reports.
Clark and Bassett found a good way to warm up on a bitterly cold day. Melbourne had first use of the wind, but it was a dubious advantage, blowing fiercely across Princes Park. The difference between them in the first quarter was Demon full forward Alan Djakovic. He led and kicked well for all of Melbourne's 3 goals to quarter time.
Across to Djakovic, who kicks a great goal, his third.
The Blues had a tall forward line for a windy day, but Sartori and Kernahan marked well. And the captain showed how much oomph was needed to kick across the wind.
Kernahan floating away at the end, but a goal.
But the Demons outplayed the Blues in the first half and surprisingly led by only 2 goals at half-time. Djakovic had 5 of their 6. He was kept quieter after the long break by Sexton, who replaced David Kernahan. Melbourne skipper Gary Lyon was reported, but bounced back with 2 brilliant goals in the third quarter. At the other end, Sartori kicked 2 more to keep the Blues in touch in a low-scoring game. And Carlton kicked the first 3 of the final quarter to get within a kick.
Wonderful footy for a goal.
But Melbourne needed the win more for a finals place, and Spalding surged into attack to set up the clincher. By who else but Djakovic? Drew Morford.
Long gathering strength. Lyon to Djakovic, geez, an exciting play. Lyon did this very well. This Djakovic, look at him, he makes something out of nothing. He's got that flair that makes a really special player. He's kicked 35 goals in the last 5 weeks, 99 for the season, including reserves. Lyon, gee, that was good against Kernahan, and then to Djakovic again.
Plays on, kicks his 6th.
He kicked 7 out of 11. He really was the difference between the two sides. Superb footy by O'Sullivan here.
With him well played, O'Sullivan.
And through it goes. Kicked a couple of goals. And this was the winner. This was the difference. This is the one that sewed it up.
He's kicked it.
Just his 7th.
Djakovic has 7.
Now, the only report, an important one for Melbourne, Gary Lyon, allegedly striking Ratton in the 3rd quarter. Well, the terrific news for Melbourne is that Gary Lyon had a smile on his face when he left the tribunal earlier this morning with John Sells, and he has been cleared and can play in the big game against North Melbourne at the MCG this week. They've got North Melbourne and Collingwood in the next 2 weeks, so great news for Melbourne supporters there. What's making headlines in this park, and this is the way Dennis voted, Alan Djakovic, who was nearly the difference between the two teams. He kicked 7 out of 11 goals yesterday. Gary Lyon, who had 15 of the best minutes in football you could imagine in the 3rd quarter, just after he was reported, and Andrew Obbs, who did the job on Craig Bradley yesterday. They were the 3, 2 and 1. As we take a look at some of the highlights, Justin Madden is with us. Jimmy Steins must be a hard man to play on because he just keeps running all day.
He is. He's a fantastic runner. He runs all day, like you said. And the difficulty is he plays the game more like a ruck rover than a ruckman. And he gets the sort of possessions that a rover or a ruck rover should get and doesn't go anywhere near where the ruckman would normally go.
Justin, everyone's saying the Collingwood are a chance. What do you make of Melbourne? Are they a chance to sneak in? They are above Collingwood on the ladder.
Yeah, well, their form's good. They've got a lot of key players, and I think the important thing is they've got players that can turn the game around, which is very important at this time of the year, and particularly in finals. You know, they've got the Gary Lyons and the Jimmy Steins and those sorts of fellas, which are very important.
You know, Justin, they say you've got to build on youth, and I agree with that, but you can only build successfully if it's good youth. So how do you rate the youth of Carlton? Are they going to be the backbone of the side for the 90s?
Well, they'll have to be, won't they? Because most of the side is youth. I mean, there are a number of fellows like myself getting on in years, and we won't be there for you know, too many more years, I suppose. So they've got to build on that, and the test will be over the next few years, I think, to see whether you know, the faith shown in them is really worthwhile.
Well, just as a little tip, I know it's hard to talk on teammates, but who do you think will be the best of them?
The best of them? Oh, look, that's very difficult. There are some very exciting players. Luke O'Sullivan's very exciting. He's got a lot to learn. Andy Cavidan, who's a young ruckman, is a great player too, and I think with a bit of experience, they'll be terrific.
Just away from the football actual playing, the players themselves, do they find it hard to enjoy being a footballer and a worker?
I think it's getting very much.
With their unique 2-year warranty.
66-1.
And the 66-1, someone says. But Jimmy Steins, 21 votes, leads D. Buick, 17, who's playing today. Lambert playing today, 16. Waitman playing today, 15. Turley, who started on the interchange on Friday night with 15. Hinkley, who's been going wonderfully well at 15. Andrew Jarman also playing today. Paul Hudson's having a rest. He's having a bye. So Jim Steins leading with 21.
Great goal. And Gary Lyon here just assessing that he had to get rid of it pretty quickly. Maybe a little bit of good fortune, but he certainly knows where the goals are, Gary Lyon.
Now, Simon Atkins kicks a goal here from
Question. There's a juggled mark over here by Stephen Tingay, a couple of grabs and a nice view of his hosiery there, but yeah, good mark.
Well, here's a typical Stephen Kernahan mark going across the pack, small pack in the middle.
They move up to 10th as we go and take a look at some of the highlights, and we start with Rowan Saws, his 300th match, and he had a bit of work to do before the bounce of the ball. But the big story yesterday was this man again, Alan Djakovic. He kicked 11 goals, 8. It's quite a remarkable performance. A little late in the program, we'll just show you how well he's been doing in his last 7 matches compared with Tony Lockett in his first 7 matches of this year. But here he is, as Dennis Committee said, a most unusual 100th goal. He'd kicked 60 in the reserves, and this was his 40th goal and first of 11 yesterday.
Should be a formality and is.
He can really win the ball under pressure. Jay Viney, and here's Djakovic again. Terrific mark, and he's just unbelievable for doing the unusual. Longmire kicked 7 yesterday. This wasn't one of them. He played on immediately, but Larkin got the goal for North, and it was a very competitive first half. Look at this Ramiro here, keeping his eye on the footy, with Rode coming in. Is this the goal of the year? Well, it was a freak goal. Unbelievable, Djakovic there.
in the forward line to kick 7 goals.
Bobby, what about this Djakovic fellow? You saw him yesterday. He's captured everybody's imagination. He's a bit of a freak, isn't he?
He's a very good player. He's probably, as a two-footed fellow or a both-sided player, whatever they want to call him nowadays, he really is magnificent. And his ability to be able to kick the ball. He actually hypnotised Michael Martin, because Michael Martin wasn't even looking where the ball. I couldn't understand. He was facing the wrong way and everything, which is most... I mean, Michael Martin wanted to take on Tony Lockett physically, and we know, which is a ridiculous thing to do, and yet he didn't want to go near Djakovic for some unaccountable reason.
So you gave him a vote, Djakovic?
Oh, heavens, he could have given him the 6 votes, because his form in the first part of the game was sensational. But what you've got to realise for Djakovic to be able to play as well as that Melbourne have got some excellent players coming back to touch. Steins isn't, of course, because he's been up in the votes all the year and almost looks a red-hot certainty to win the medal because of his great play. And Yates came back to touch yesterday, together with other fellas like Dyson and Lovett and Stretch start to play well. They put the ball up to Djakovic in the fashion that gives him the opportunity. You'll see them coming along here. There's Steins now, I think, taking the ball. This is Clark going up. A couple of nice easy bounces. What do you want to do, Ron? You want to talk about Djakovic?
No, I want
it's coming up to him now, see? Look, there he is there.
I wanted to talk about the other end. Obviously, the gamble of playing Carey after so many weeks out injured didn't pay off.
Well, Ron, you've got to play him one week. You might as well play him in this game. I don't think it would have made any difference to the result. Carey actually started off very well and was not very far from it. And one game, if they're going to play in the finals, they want Carey playing well. And, you know, he wasn't far from it yesterday. But, I mean, they were all overshadowed by Djakovic's form. That's all there was about it.
Well, it seems to be that North aren't quite there, Bob, up with the real top sides.
Well, their defeats are huge, aren't they? They get defeated by huge amounts when things go wrong for them. They appear to lose the plot somewhere in the game.
Their lowest losing margin this year is 35 points, and most of them have been around 60 points, 70 points. It's a worry, isn't it?
That is the worry when they get against the teams like that.
Darren Bennett, Bob. How's he performing?
I think Darren Bennett's playing quite well, and I think he's a very useful player in their team. And as for any worries about him, you know, saying, oh, he's out of position, he might have his nose out, I don't think in the slightest.
He's broken his finger. He's broken his finger, so he probably won't play. Would he play, Gerard, with a broken finger next week? Is it possible?
Oh, definitely possible. You can just inject those and strap them up to the other one, and away you go.
Yeah, Bob,
Calvin Templeton played with 2 broken thumbs in 1 week, as a matter of fact.
Bob, can you see Hungry Bartlett's nickname being transferred across to Alan Djakovic?
Well, his statistics, he doesn't like handballing. There's no two ways about that. And 4 people told him to pass the one that he did yesterday. I mean, he was definitely going to have another shot, but he said, oh, perhaps I better let this. And it was a beautifully, as Dennis committed, it was a beautifully weighted, centimetre perfect pass.
Well, Long might have kicked a few goals yesterday, but how do you see Bryce fitting at full back, which has been a bit of a troublesome spot for Melbourne for the year?
Actually, I thought Bryce played quite well, but I don't know if he's a genuine full-back, Bryce. You know, I think he might be a little bit hit and miss, to be truthful.
Played well on Lockett a couple of weeks ago too.
Yeah, but he's quite a good player, Bryce. You know, and he's got all the necessary equipment to play there.
Let's have a look at Djakovic versus Lockett. We know Dacos has kicked 29 in the last 3, but here's Djakovic's last 7 games and Lockett's first 7. Remember when he came back with a flurry? Well, Djakovic has kicked 49 in the last 7, 3, 8, 6, 6, 8, 7, 11. And Lockett started 12, 10, 12, 4, 7, 5, 8. So Tony kicked 58 in his first 7, and Allen's kicked 49 in his last 7.
I don't think there's ever been a player to come into a season halfway through after playing the reserves and make such a splash.
Yes,
full forward, it's just amazing.
It's been quite extraordinary. Let's pay a tribute to him and have a look at some of his goals from yesterday.
Lyon, a great hand pass to Viney. 40 metres out, Viney. Steers it low into the wind. Djakovic. Larkin goal. Martin following up. Met solidly. Djakovic back after it. Still only about 35 metres out. 40 out. Left foot snap. A beautiful effort. Great goal.
In front by Bennett, who wanted to play on. He was dragged down by Fairley. Now it's with Djakovic. Djakovic from 20 metres out kicks a goal.
Dyson goes as hard as he can. Bennett in good position now. Offhand. Djakovic. Oh, sensational. Kicked by Spalding. Djakovic, he marked it inside the field of play. Kicked by Djakovic after the siren. A banana. Oh, the arms have gone up. He's kicked it.
Melbourne.
Well, he's a superstar of the game. There's no question about that in 7 short weeks. We take a break. Back with more after.
So they've had just 2 goals in this last quarter, both to Clark.
And who do we see here is Carey. He's pretty ordinary by his own standards than Wayne Carey.
And plenty of superlatives about this man in the last few weeks. Alan Jakovic.
And Jose Romero we'll see here, very courageous, running into the unknown, and that was a great mark.
And here's Alan Jakovic, and Mickey Martin definitely off the boil there, wandering around, wondering what's going on. Well, Alan Jakovic, left foot. We know he's two-sided. There's a great example of that.
Well, here's another one that I thought was a bit similar to Buick's. It's a sensational goal, there's no question of that, and he definitely meant it. So you've got to give him full.
Now here's Alan Jakovic again. He couldn't run around because the ball had gone. Banana kick. I'm getting the itches mixed up here. Alan Jakovic, the second goal, tremendous balance, and the decision to go for the kick. He's falling backwards, eye on the ball. It's absolutely terrific. Pelé could not have done better.
Well, if you're not a Brazilian, I'd agree with you, but yeah, it was good, wasn't it? Some good ones here, I reckon, don't you?
Terrific goals.
Would have really kept you busy. Goal-kicking progress. Well done, Alan Jakovic. You've kicked a lot lately, and that was one of the most spectacular. Tony Lockett still on top with 84. Sumic and Longmire 77. Dacos charging up on 62. Jakovic has got 50, and if he had his reserves in, he's got 110. It's not bad. Bobby David.
Ground. This could be their year. Stretch a long kick. The siren. The Demons have won it.
This was the scene back in 1987, the last cutthroat round when the Demons stormed home to pinch a spot in the finals, their first appearance for 23 years. It's ironic that 4 years later, Melbourne must again venture out to the Western Oval and win a game that could extend its season. Coach John Northey has been happy with Melbourne's recent form, only dropping 1 from its past 6 outings, but a bye the following week has created some headaches.
Have to train right through the week and then sit by the radio or go out to the game.
Footscray's form has fluctuated all year, and sitting in 10th spot can only salvage some pride. But the disappointment of 87 still haunts Bulldog fans and is just the motivation coach Terry Wheeler needs to prepare his troops.
We certainly haven't forgotten that, and we're out to redeem that position and make it very difficult for the Melbourne Football Club to take finals this year.
Also,
downing the Dogs.
The old arch enemy.
Footscray at the Western Oval by 11 points. The 4 points gives the Demons some hope of a place in the finals, but the way they won would hardly inspire thoughts of a premiership.
In an ordinary opening, at least Kennedy and Jay Viney did their best to keep the crowd entertained. Jakovic was giving Kennedy a bath in the first term, but the spearhead must have left his kicking boots behind. He eventually got one, and when Heaver capitalised after Foster could have almost been paid a mark, the D's led by 15 points at quarter time. The second quarter was almost as forgettable. Brownlow favourite Steins opened his account, and then at the other end, Hawkins finally got the Doggies first after a brilliant mark. But the rest of the quarter almost sent the crowd to sleep, and the half-time siren came as something of a relief. Melbourne 25 points up. There wasn't much to fire the imagination in the third term, but 2 marks resulting in goals by Chris Grant gave Footscray some chance, the margin 10 points at the final change. Bulldog live-wire Justin Charles and even coach Terry Wheeler tried to whip the crowd up, but it only served to fire up Jakovic, and his second gave Melbourne some breathing space. The Dogs refused to lay down, and their best passage of play for the match, which resulted in a goal to Wine, saw them within a kick. But the Demons were able to hang on for the last 20 minutes, eventually running out uninspiring 11-point winners, and they now face an anxious wait with the last round bye to see if they'll take part in their 5th successive final series.
So Melbourne by 11 points. Jimmy Steins probably racked up another 3 Brownlow votes. 8-8-56 to Footscray, 6-9-45. Chris Grant kicked 2 for the Doggies. Alan Jakovic, 3 goals, 6 and 4 out of bounds. Summed up Melbourne in a game the less said about, the better. And that's pretty much the way the Demons felt about bringing their home and away season to a close. After the match, the Melbourne players were in a daze, not knowing whether they will be in the finals and not knowing whether they should be after such an ordinary display. The Demons may have gone out hoping for the same euphoric ending to the 91 season as 87, but after the 120 minutes, it was a disconsolate mob who left the field. Sure, they'd achieved their aim, winning the match, but the sombre mood in the rooms after the game showed that the players and the coach knew better than anyone that this was just a performance.
Maybe, I think even if you were a coach today, you would have stood up and your arms would have been flying around everywhere, because it was just one of those appeared terrible games. There was so many fumbling, the disposal of the ball was terrible, the turnover on both sides was, it wasn't very good at all. However, you know, we've come away winning the game at Footscray, which probably isn't a bad effort when you analyse it.
The Demons with a bye next week now must sit and hope that either Collingwood or Essendon slip up, a position they should never have been in after their great start to the year.
I suppose we deserve it because we didn't play well enough during the season, you know. And plus also today wasn't very good, even though we won.
So this week, training as usual. For what? No one knows.
Yeah, it's a funny feeling in here, I guess. We're in it and now we've got to, I suppose, rely on Geelong and Adelaide beating the other team. So we don't know whether to sort of sing the song or just sit back and wait.
Well, I mean, it's just out of our hands now. At least we won the game. We might have fell in, but we won the game and just got to wait and see.
Reports in the AFL Tribunal sat this morning and cleared Sydney's Greg Williams of a striking charge for the second week in a row. Jason Love also got off, but Fitzroy's Brenton Claby was suspended for 2 matches. 3 reports today: Footscray pair Glenn Coleman and Rick Kennedy both for striking, and Melbourne's Steve O'Dwyer was pinged for charging. Goal kickers and Tony Hawthorn and Geelong will fight it out for the double chance. St Kilda looks safe in 4th spot, Essendon 5th, Collingwood makes up the 6th, and Melbourne's hopes are still alive. North Melbourne cannot make it, so a disappointing end to the season.
Today's bye, and plenty of players were on tenterhooks, keeping an eye on the result of the Geelong-Collingwood clash at Cardinia Park. The Cats did the right thing, and Hawthorn's thrashing of Essendon elevated Melbourne to 5th spot. But most of the Demons found the wait agonising.
Relief, ultimately, in the end, we're over. During the match, it was pretty hard to tune in. It was particularly early when it was a little bit tight.
It's been a long week for Lyon and his teammates, but they're now pumped up and ready to tackle the struggling Bombers next Saturday.
Our form in elimination finals over the last 4 or 5 years has been pretty good, and that's where I get our confidence from.
Meanwhile, the Eagles are licking their wounds after failing...
Player who hasn't had a kick for 2 months. Stephen Quartermain is down at the Junction Oval tonight. Steve, I believe Glenn Lovett looks like he's going to get the nod.
Yes, Ed, Glenn Lovett hasn't played for more than 2 months since breaking his wrist against the Sydney Swans. But coach John Northey indicated tonight Lovett is likely to play because of his sheer value to the side. Everything else went pretty well here tonight at the Junction Oval, and Northey said the week off did the Demons the world of good.
Oh, no, I think this time of the year it's probably a help. I mean, they've all got niggly injuries. A couple of players gives them an extra little bit of time to get over those other injuries perhaps they're carrying. And this time, you know, I think players are looking for a bit of a spell, and hopefully this time around it'll be of great help to us.
Glenn Lovett, he hasn't played for more than 2 months, but word is that you're going to give him a go. Is it worth risking him?
Oh, well, he's such a good runner. You know, there's certainly no decision on that, I might say, at this stage, but he's a very good runner and he goes all day for you. He's extremely fit. Perhaps his ball handling would be down a little bit, but he just gives you 100% on the ground like a lot of our other young fellows. So with that in mind, you know, perhaps we will look at him.
Well, Essendon the last couple of weeks have been absolutely woeful. Do you expect a different team this week?
Oh, yes, you never underestimate Essendon. You know, they've got some very good players. They've got probably more experience in their team than any other side, and you would never underestimate Essendon and say, you know, they're playing poorly, we can roll these fellows over, you know.
He's always got a few tricks up his sleeve.
Oh, yes, he tries everything as he's trying through the press at the moment, you know, and we're awake up to all those sorts of things.
Melbourne coach John Northey and just a small crowd watched here tonight at the Junction Oval. Meantime, rumblings down at Tigerland tonight. Reports that Kevin Bartlett is going to be replaced as coach by former Hawthorn coach.
The Demons have threatened to deliver, only to stumble short of greatness.
Coming up for 5 years without making a real impression in the finals, let's say, we're certainly aware that we need to make an impression, and hopefully this year. But I can remember saying the same thing last year.
A surprise is the resignation of popular team manager John Sell, strangely timed on the eve of the finals. Finals eve produced 2 drubbings for the Bombers, and skipper Tim Watson says Essendon fans have deserted training as a result.
I suppose they're like all the people that watch the football. They can only go on what they've seen over the last month or so, and we haven't been that impressive.
The oldies at Essendon are running out of time for more premierships.
Simon and Terry and myself, who aren't going to play football for a lot more years, and I suppose I'm appealing to the other guys that you know, what we would love to do is finish our careers on a high note.
It could be now or never. Drew Moore.
The one that'll hang very nicely around his neck.
When you're playing well, you tend to get a bit more. People tend to watch a bit more, and you sometimes get a tagger and things like that. But the fact that we're in the finals, you know, it's we're all concentrating on winning and going all the way to the grand final. So, you know, I'm not really thinking about it.
Every Melbourne fan would have to agree. that if it wasn't for Steins, the season would have ended a week ago. Even in losing games, the big fella has still been among the best three.
I'm quite sure tomorrow's elimination final will be a photo finish. Although the Demons haven't been a picture of consistency this year, I reckon the Bombers are nothing more than a flash in the pan. So, I'm giving the old kiss to Melbourne.
On Sunday, the Saints will march further into September with a hard-fought victory over Geelong, while the Eagles will have a field day at home against Hawthorn. Now, if by some chance Melbourne is knocked out of the finals, the players are still required to train next week for a fashion parade organised to raise money. Today it was Alan Jakovich and Glenn Lovett strutting their stuff. For the Demons' sake, I hope they're a little more coordinated tomorrow. Lou Richards, National 9 News.
Well, despite our burst of spring weather, it hasn't been enough to dry out the car park in time for the weekend of finals at Waverley. 5,000 car spaces have been sectioned off because of the muddy conditions. The league spent $40,000 trying to repair the area, but alternative arrangements have been made for Sunday only. 2,000 car spots will be available at the Waverley Garden Shopping Centre on the corner of Jackson's and Police Roads. Another 600 will be up for grabs at the Wheelers Hill Shopping Centre on Gels Road, but that's for Sunday only.
Melbourne and Essendon will know by 5 o'clock tomorrow whether their hopes remain alive. Both teams haven't been playing very well lately, but with the business end having arrived and the loser bowing out, the clash at VFL Park should be a beauty.
The Bombers and the Demons had just one meeting this year back in round 11 when, in a low-scoring encounter, Essendon scraped home by a goal after the controversial Stephen Clark incident. That was in the middle of a slump which came after the round 9 bye, but skipper Gary Lyon says it's a vastly different situation coming off a week off and going into the finals.
I just think at that time of the year it's a bit of a different set of circumstances. Certainly after 22 weeks, I think the boys will appreciate a week off.
Lyon says the wide open spaces of VFL Park will suit the Bennett-Jakovich forward combination.
It's not even possible to play three key forwards at Waverley, you know, and Darren Bennett certainly should be able to have enough room to share the ground with Alan Jakovich and maybe provide a second prong in attack.
Last important one, St Kilda's Lazavidovic. Michael Roberts is there at the moment. Any news, Michael, particularly on Sean White?
Well, bad news, Sandy, for Demon fans. Sean White has been found guilty of striking Michael Werner in Saturday's elimination final and will miss 1 week. The case went for 50 minutes and White pleaded not guilty to the charge and said at no stage did he lift his fist or his elbow, but the tribunal found the act very, very harsh, and this means White will miss the important encounter, the cutthroat encounter against the West Coast Eagles on Sunday at VFL Park. So just repeating, Sean White out for 1 week.
John Coleman in 1951 and Collingwood's fabulous Phil Carman in 1977, Geelong's superstar Gary Ablett will face the tribunal on a striking charge. Ablett is the latest and most controversial victim of the so-called trial by video system of reports. After watching this shot from behind the goals at the scoreboard end, investigation blow coming up to their sudden death final against the West Coast Eagles on Sunday when defender Sean White was found guilty of striking Essendon's Michael Werner and rubbed out for 1 week. So repeating the bad news for Melbourne, Sean White suspended for 1 week and he will miss the match against the Eagles. And news just through from the AFL Tribunal, St Kilda ruckman Lazavidovic pleaded guilty to his striking charge.
Advised him he was quitting. The Demons accepted the resignation and it's understood Jackson will put himself in the November draft. Both Jackson and the club refused to comment publicly, however they did confirm they had parted company. Stephen Quartermain, 10 Eyewitness News.
Meantime, the Demons received some more bad news just a short time ago. Another of their rovers, Stephen Clark, has been suspended by the AFL Tribunal. Clark was cited by AFL investigation officer Max Croxford after he viewed a videotape of last Sunday's match against the Bears at the Gabba. Clark was reported for striking John Gastev with the left arm to the face in the third quarter. After a case lasting an hour tonight, the tribunal found the Melbourne Rover guilty and outed him for 3 matches. So even if the Demons make the 6, they're going to be struggling to get back for Stephen Clark. Well, North Melbourne...
Todd Viney. At VFL Park on Sunday, the two players come face-to-face for the first time since that run-in, and Lou Richards says ill feeling between the clubs continues to simmer.
Taking things easy at home today, it allowed Todd Viney time to reflect on how the season has panned out so far. A mid-season slump almost saw the Demons finish the year with egg on their face. But after having the Bombers on toast last week, Northy's boys are finally cooking. They front up against the Eagles this weekend, the former flag favourites who have gone off the boil. The sides have developed a bitter rivalry in recent years. This infamous clash back in round 16 only added to the feud, and Viney could find himself a marked man.
Yeah, I just, going out, probably there might be a little bit more attention paid to me, but, it's just part and parcel of the game that you've got to put up with.
This is Melbourne's 4th consecutive finals campaign, and in an effort to break the club's 27-year premiership drought, Viney has pulled out all stops and is playing his best football ever.
Yeah, well, I think probably for the fact that I've played every game of the year and my fitness has probably been the best it's been, I'd say, yeah, by far.
It's a big ask for the Demons to win the flag from 5th position, but the players are feeling mighty confident, and something tells me they won't let their chance slip by without a fight.
Well, I might be doing the dirty work today, but I reckon it'll be Todd and his teammates who'll be doing the cleaning up on Sunday. And the Eagles' premiership hopes will go right down the drain.
Melbourne and the West Coast Eagles has all the ingredients to make it one of the toughest games on record. No two teams have built up such bitter rivalry since the Eagles entered the competition 5 years ago. Melbourne remains the only club to have beaten the Eagles in the home and away competition in Perth in the last 2 years. That was in round 20 last year. But there was plenty of spite in the game, not only during it, but also afterwards, as the Demons left the ground, wildly gesturing to the crowd after their 36-point win. But the Eagles turned the tables in last year's first semi-final. That game, at this stage, remains as the Eagles' only finals victory. After last Sunday's loss to Hawthorn, the Eagles again find themselves in a first semi-final, and again against Melbourne.
Apart from the fact that we've lost the first final, we've lost 2 games in a row now, which hasn't happened all year. So we feel like we've let ourselves down there as well, and really looking forward to training this week and setting things right.
I've got a lot of faith in their abilities and also them as men. So I expect that they will come back.
Another incident that did nothing to heal the rift between the two sides was the Lewis-Viney finger-biting hearing. Lewis did his time after being found guilty. And now with a backdrop of high drama, Melbourne coach John Northey is expecting and is ready for all-out war.
It's just traditional rivalry now. It's like perhaps any other team playing Collingwood, as we know.
Melbourne officials, meanwhile, are still considering evidence in the hope of a rehearing in the Sean White case. At this stage, because of a 1-week suspension, White is out of Sunday's clash.
An appeal against Sean White's 1-match suspension hit a double snag today. The Demons are struggling to come up with fresh evidence needed for the case to be reopened. It's understood that footage shot by the umpires did not show the incident clearly. As well, new AFL rules have made it harder to appeal. Clubs must pay $2,000 for costs of a fresh hearing and $5,000 bond, which is forfeited if the tribunal deems the appeal to be frivolous. White received a 1-match suspension last night after charging Michael Werner in retaliation to Werner hitting. The Eagles have built up a hatred for is Melbourne, and that feeling is mutual. 1988 and the elimination final, Melbourne win by 2 points in a dramatic finish.
Malaxos picks it up with his left foot. 10 seconds remaining. The shot by Redstead is off target at 1 point.
1990, heated clashes in Perth. First, Eagle Peter Malesso uses Earl Sporting's head as a doormat. Then a sensation at the final break when a melee develops involving Melbourne coach John Northey and an Eagles trainer. Players from both sides become involved before a spirited final term that saw Melbourne become the only team to win in Perth for the year. As the Demons leave the field triumphant, they let their feelings be known to the Perth crowd. Later in the rooms, comments made by Melbourne players were recorded by a TV camera and used as ammunition by Mick Malthouse. The Eagles get their revenge and make it 1-1 in finals with a 5-goal win in last year's first semi-final. This year, more controversy, as Chris Lewis is suspended for 3 weeks on a charge of biting Todd Viney. The Eagles furious that Melbourne leaked to the media details that Viney underwent AIDS tests. Viney's frank evidence in the tribunal was also remembered by the Eagles camp. It all adds up to a big sudden death match come Sunday at Waverley. Should be a beauty. Well, one of Australia's top